The crystal chandelier cast warm light over our family's Christmas dinner as my brother Trevor carved the prime rib with ceremonial flair. The dining room table was laden with expensive dishes, lobster bisque, imported wines, truffle-stuffed potatoes, all purchased with money from what my family dismissively called my little government job. "So, Trevor," my mother said, refilling her wine glass with the $200 bottle I'd bought, "tell everyone about your real estate closing this week. 6 figures in commission." Trevor beamed, adjusting his new Rolex, another purchase funded by my salary. The Henderson estate finally sold. I made more in one deal than most people see all year. My sister Madison nodded enthusiastically from across the table. "That's what I call real success. Not like some people who waste their education pushing papers in some obscure office." The barb was directed at me, of course. For the past 3 years, I'd been supporting my family's lavish lifestyle while enduring their constant criticism of my career choice. To them, I was just Sarah, the family disappointment who worked some vague administrative job in Washington, D.C. instead of pursuing real success like Trevor's sales career or Madison's lifestyle blog. "Speaking of which," my father said, setting down his fork with theatrical authority, "Sarah, when are you going to quit that dead-end position and get a real career? You're 31 years old. It's time to stop playing around with government work and do something meaningful with your life." I shifted uncomfortably in my chair, the secure phone in my jacket pocket vibrating with what I knew were urgent diplomatic communications. For the past week, I'd been managing a delicate crisis involving NATO allies and emerging threats in Eastern Europe. The situation required constant monitoring, even during family holidays. "My work is meaningful," I said quietly, taking a sip of the wine I'd purchased with my diplomatic salary. Trevor laughed dismissively. "Sarah, you work in some random office building doing paperwork. That's not a career. That's a placeholder until you figure out what you actually want to do with your life." My mother nodded in agreement. "Your cousin Jessica just made partner at her law firm. Now that's impressive. When people ask what my daughter does, I'm embarrassed to say you're a government clerk." The irony was suffocating. While they mocked my clerk position, I was actually serving as Deputy Chief of Mission at the U.S. Embassy in Germany, the second highest-ranking American diplomat in one of our most critical European posts. My security clearance was higher than most senators, and I regularly briefed cabinet-level officials on international threats. But I'd learned long ago that my family had no interest in understanding the complexities of diplomatic service. To them, government work was synonymous with bureaucratic mediocrity. "At least she has health insurance," Madison said with fake sympathy. "Though I suppose that's all government jobs are good for. Basic benefits for people who can't handle real careers." My father leaned back in his chair, the same chair I'd helped them buy when they were facing foreclosure 2 years ago. "Sarah, I'm going to be direct because someone needs to be. You're wasting your potential. You have an Ivy League education, you speak multiple languages, and you're throwing it all away on some dead-end bureaucratic position." "It's not dead-end," I protested, though I knew they wouldn't listen. "Please," Trevor scoffed. "You've been there 3 years and you're still doing the same basic administrative work. Face it, Sarah, you're not management material. You're not cut out for real leadership positions." The condescension in his voice was particularly galling since Trevor's idea of leadership involved convincing elderly couples to downsize their homes for his commission. My mother reached over and patted my hand with theatrical concern. "Sweetheart, we're only saying this because we love you. We want you to have the kind of success that Trevor and Madison have achieved. Real success that people can see and respect." Madison pulled out her phone to show pictures from her latest sponsored vacation. "Look at what I accomplished this month. Brand partnerships with 3 major companies. That's what happens when you build a real career instead of hiding in some government basement." The government basement comment was particularly insulting since my office in the embassy overlooked the Brandenburg Gate, and I regularly hosted meetings with European Union officials and NATO commanders. "Maybe you should consider going back to school," my father suggested. "Get an MBA, learn some real business skills. I know it seems scary to leave the security of government work, but sometimes you have to take risks to achieve actual success." Trevor nodded sagely. "Dad's right. You're playing it too safe, Sarah. Real careers require real risks. Look at me. I left corporate sales to start my own real estate business. That's what success looks like." My secure phone vibrated again, more insistently this time. I recognized the alert pattern, This was a priority flash message, the highest level of diplomatic communication. Something major was happening that required immediate attention from senior embassy staff. "Excuse me," I said, standing from the table. "I need to check my phone." "See," Madison said to the table. "Even on Christmas she's glued to that job. That's what happens when you don't have real career boundaries." My father shook his head disapprovingly. "Sarah, put the phone away. Whatever paperwork emergency you think you have can wait until after Christmas. This is exactly the kind of unhealthy work-life balance that comes from dead-end government positions." But as I glanced at the message, my blood ran cold. The NATO Article 5 alert system was active, and I was being summoned for an immediate secure video conference with the Secretary of State. I stepped into the kitchen to read the full message, my heart pounding as I processed the severity of what was unfolding. Russian military units had crossed into NATO territory, and the alliance was activating emergency protocols for the first time in its history. As Deputy Chief of Mission in Germany, I was a key liaison for coordinating the European response. My secure phone rang immediately. The caller ID showed AMBG, Ambassador Harrison calling from the embassy. "Sarah, thank God." Ambassador Harrison's voice was tense. "How quickly can you get to the embassy? We need you here for the emergency NATO session." "Sir, I'm with family for Christmas dinner. Can I participate via secure video from?" "Negative. This requires in-person presence in the SCIF. We're coordinating the largest NATO response since the Cold War. The President is flying to Germany tonight, and you're briefing him at 0600. My mouth went dry. Briefing the President of the United States on Christmas morning about a potential Article 5 situation was about as far from a dead-end government job as possible. "I'll be there in 2 hours, I said, already calculating travel time. "Sarah, one more thing." Ambassador Harrison's voice softened slightly. "I know this ruins your holiday, but the Secretary specifically requested you for this crisis team. Your work on the Eastern European threat assessments made you indispensable for this situation." As I ended the call, I could hear my family's laughter from the dining room, still celebrating Trevor's real estate success with wine I'd purchased using my diplomatic salary. I returned to the table to find them deep in conversation about Madison's latest Instagram collaboration. "Sorry," I said, reaching for my purse. "I need to leave. Something urgent has come up at work." My father rolled his eyes dramatically. "Sarah, this is exactly what we're talking about. On Christmas Day? What kind of urgent paperwork could possibly require you to leave Christmas dinner?" Trevor shook his head in disbelief. "Let me guess. Someone needs you to file some forms?" "Sarah, this is why government work isn't a real career. Real professionals don't get called away from family holidays for administrative tasks." "It's not administrative," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's a genuine emergency." Madison laughed. "What kind of emergency? Did someone lose a filing cabinet key?" Before I could respond, there was a firm knock at the front door. My stomach dropped as I heard multiple footsteps on the porch. I recognized the sound of security teams moving in formation. "I'll get it," my father said, clearly annoyed by another interruption to his Christmas dinner. But as he opened the door, instead of finding neighbors or delivery personnel, he was faced with 4 men in dark suits wearing discreet earpieces. "Good evening," the lead agent said, flashing his credentials. "Special Agent Martinez, Diplomatic Security Service. We're here to escort Deputy Chief of Mission Chin to an emergency briefing." The words "Deputy Chief of Mission" hung in the air like an explosion. My father stared at the badge, then at the agents, then back at me. "Deputy Chief of what?" Agent Martinez stepped into the foyer, followed by his team. "Ma'am, we have a helicopter standing by to transport you to the embassy. The ambassador is waiting for your arrival to begin the NATO emergency session." Trevor appeared behind my father, his face pale as he processed what he was hearing. "NATO? Sarah, what's going on?" But Agent Martinez was already briefing me on the situation. "Ma'am, the crisis has escalated. Russian forces have engaged NATO units directly. The President has declared this Article 5 situation, and all senior diplomatic personnel are being activated for emergency response." Madison had joined the crowd at the door, her Instagram-perfect composure completely shattered. "Sarah, who are these people? Why are they calling you Deputy Chief of Mission?" My mother appeared last, still holding her wine glass. I don't understand. Sarah works in an office. She does paperwork. Agent Martinez looked confused, glancing between my family and me. Ma'am, your family doesn't know about your position? The question highlighted the devastating gap between my actual responsibilities and my family's perception of my career. Agent Martinez reached into his jacket and pulled out an official State Department communication device. Ma'am, I have Ambassador Harrison on secure line. He needs to brief you during transport. He handed me the device, and Ambassador Harrison's voice came through clearly enough for my stunned family to hear. Sarah, the situation has deteriorated rapidly. The President wants you personally handling the German Chancellor's coordination calls. Your threat assessment from last month was exactly right. Putin was testing NATO resolve, and now we're responding. My father's face had gone completely white. The President? The German Chancellor. Ambassador Harrison continued, unaware of my family's confusion. The Secretary of State specifically requested you for this crisis because of your expertise in Russian military doctrine. You're the only diplomat in Europe who correctly predicted this escalation pattern. Trevor stepped closer, his confidence completely evaporated. Sarah, who is this person calling you? What's really happening? Agent Martinez looked at me questioningly. Ma'am, do you want me to explain your position to your family? I nodded, too exhausted by years of their dismissal to explain myself. Your sister serves as Deputy Chief of Mission at the United States Embassy in Berlin, Agent Martinez said with professional authority. She's the second highest-ranking American diplomat in Germany, responsible for coordinating all U.S.-German relations and serving as the primary liaison between NATO headquarters and the White House. The silence that followed was deafening. Agent Martinez continued, DCM Chin has been managing the current crisis for the past week, including direct communications with the German Defense Ministry, NATO's Supreme Allied Commander and the National Security Council. She has top-secret/SCI clearance and regularly briefs cabinet-level officials on European security threats. Madison's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the hardwood floor they'd renovated using my salary. Furthermore, Agent Martinez added, DCM Chen's annual salary is $180,000, not including diplomatic allowances and security benefits. Her position requires Senate confirmation and direct appointment by the President. My mother sank into the foyer chair, finally understanding the source of the money that had been funding their lifestyle for years. Agent Martinez's radio crackled. Sir, the helicopter pilot is reporting we need immediate departure. Weather conditions are deteriorating. Ambassador Harrison's voice came through the device again. Sarah, I hate to pressure you, but we have NATO allies waiting for your threat assessment. The Chancellor specifically asked for you by name. My father found his voice first. Sarah, we had no idea. Why didn't you tell us? I tried, I said, moving toward the door with the security team. But every time I mentioned my work, you dismissed it as paperwork and government bureaucracy. You were more interested in spending my salary than understanding how I earned it. Trevor looked physically ill. But you never said you were. I mean, we thought you were just an administrative assistant or something. You never asked, I replied. For 3 years, you've been living off my diplomatic salary while telling me to get a real career. You've been wearing clothes, eating food, and living in a house maintained by money from the dead-end government job. You've been mocking. Agent Martinez gestured toward the door. Ma'am, we really need to move. The President's security team is already en route to Berlin. As I walked toward the waiting vehicles, my family followed helplessly onto the porch. The President is coming to Berlin, my mother whispered. He's coming because your daughter is one of the most important diplomatic figures in Europe, Agent Martinez explained. DCM Chin has been preventing this crisis from escalating to full military conflict for the past week. NATO commanders trust her assessment of Russian intentions more than most generals. The black SUVs pulled away from my family's house, leaving them standing on the porch in their Christmas finery, finally understanding the magnitude of what they'd been dismissing for years. Through the rear window, I could see them staring after the convoy, probably for the first time grasping that their daughter wasn't a low-level government clerk, but one of America's senior diplomats. My secure phone buzzed with messages from NATO headquarters, the German Foreign Ministry, and the White House Situation Room. Each notification represented the weight of international crisis management that I'd been handling while my family mocked my career choice. Agent Martinez handed me a briefing folder marked, Top Secret/FBI. Ma'am, these are the latest intelligence assessments. The helicopter will give you 20 minutes to review before we reach the embassy. As I opened the folder containing satellite imagery and threat analyses that would determine NATO's response to potential World War III, I thought about Trevor's real estate commission and Madison's Instagram partnerships. Their real success suddenly seemed microscopic compared to the responsibility of preventing international conflict. My phone rang with a call from the Secretary of State's office. The crisis required immediate diplomatic intervention, and I was one of the few people in the world qualified to provide it. When I returned to my family, if I returned, everything would be different. They could never again dismiss my career as meaningless paperwork or suggest I needed to find real work. The security clearance, the presidential briefings, the NATO crisis management, all of it was now undeniably real. But more importantly, they would have to face the truth about where their comfortable lifestyle had actually come from. Every expensive dinner, every luxury purchase, every bill I'd helped them pay had been funded by the dead-end government job they'd spent years ridiculing. The helicopter lifted off into the winter night, carrying me toward an embassy where world leaders were waiting for my assessment of international threats. Behind me, my family was left to process the reality that their unsuccessful daughter was actually one of the most important diplomatic figures in the Western Alliance. They had wanted me to get a real career, never realizing I was already living one that most people could never imagine reaching. Now they would spend the rest of their lives knowing they had dismissed genuine importance while depending on its financial rewards. The irony was perfect. While they'd been celebrating Trevor's single real estate sale, their sister had been preventing World War III.